Okay, are you ready?
Yes,
Yes, okay, cool. All right, so you were born in 1939.
correct.
You said you were born a Cockney.
Oh, yes. Well, that traditionally meant you were born in the sound of Bow Bells, which was the church in the city of London,
Right.
and that you were called a Cockney.
But where were you born then?
Oh, in Great Ormond Street Hospital in London. We lived, this was the beginning of the war, and we lived in Enfield, North London, which was my grandparents' home.
You spoke of the war. What do you remember of it, if anything?
Oh, quite a lot. Mostly the rushing down to the shelter, the bomb shelter we had in the house when you heard a siren going off. And you go down there and it was sort of quite frightening in a way. But then the all clear sounded and off you went back upstairs and resume your sleep. So, yes, that was, my main experience of the war was that. And we were evacuated, my mother and I, to Hereford. It's probably only 6 months, but it's at the height of the bombing of London when all the children were evacuated, or a large number were. And my father was in Africa, North Africa, most of the war. So the other memory was that I didn't see him till I was 3. And when he came back from war, he was, I ran to him, I said, "Mummy, who is this man?" And he was heartbroken because, I cried and didn't know who he was. And he had come back from his service in the war to say hello. And he was his first and only child up to then, not knowing him or not recognising him or anything. It was quite upsetting for him. Yes, from 0 to 6, probably saw him 3 or 4 times. So that's when I suppose you form the relationships. And then, of course, when I was 8, I went off to boarding school. So there was very little time from 8 to, ever, until really after school, way after, age 18, 20 sort of thing.
So from 8, as you said, you went to boarding school?
Yeah, the Downs School, which was near Bristol. At 8, I boarded.
Was that normal? Or...
That was normal, yeah, absolutely. Well, it was a small school in terms of only about 70 people. It's on a country estate called the Tintersfield, which was Lord Wraxall's estate. There was no mains gas or electricity, so the lighting was by Calor gas cylinders installed, and you had things called mantles, i.e. gas lights all around where you would have wall lights. We didn't notice that as odd. The food was very much after the war. They had lots of rabbits surrounding in the ground, so a lot of rabbits were shot and eaten. They were very tasty. Otherwise, whatever you had on your plate, you ate. No argument. And I spent many afternoons, instead of playing sport, eating boiled onions because you had to finish it. And with tears in my eyes, for 3 hours, I struggled with these boiled onions. So my hatred of onions persists to today. I mean, the teachers were all out of the army, or navy. They had no experience in teaching, which didn't help us in our education. They were probably fairly sadistic, generally speaking, but did I suffer? No. We just sort of got on with it. If you witnessed any bad behaviour from masters, nothing much you could do about it. You would never dream of telling your parents. You certainly wouldn't tell the headmaster. It was a strict regime. Corporal punishment was very popular. I was quite naughty, and I suppose my highlight of those days was forming something with my friends called the Wreckers Association. And today, I mean, I still have this badge, which my grandfather made because he was in the business, and we had this banner made by my friend Alistair Newman, who became a very great friend in the rest of my life, and his mother ran up this flag, which was fantastic at the time, and it survived 70 years on. And this we flew over our den because we had a lot of wooded grounds in the school. This is what we flew proudly over our den, but the WA stood for Wreckers Association, which meant we went round wrecking other people's dens, which obviously didn't go down with the authorities very well. And there were 10 exclusive members, and the more you were beaten by the headmaster, the higher you rose in ranking. So we were quite naughty, but they were happy memories by and large.
You were at Down School until you were, what, 13?
Yeah, 13. I took the common entrance, which inevitably I failed because of no teachers. My father was not pleased. My mother was in tears. I was just, said, oh dear, I'll take it again. My father said, you can't just do that because I intend that you should go to Harrow, and Harrow are not accepting second choice, second goes. Oh dear, I said. Anyway, father being what he was, very determined throughout his life, and he never gave up on doing anything. And I hope some of that will distill through me, down through you, to everywhere, because that was the sort of person he was. And he managed to get a second shot at the common entrance, and he took me away from the school, which was right, and my friends, which was sad. And we went to London, and he stayed in a flat in London with my mother, and I went to a cramming school, they called Davis's in Chelsea. 8 weeks of heavy work enabled me to get into Harrow in the East of 1953. The first term, because, as I say, I failed the common entrance, most people in my house had been there in September term, and this was now January. So they'd all established friendships. So, yes, it was hard. The first term was pretty hellish. I weighed 9 stone, 9 pounds. I don't know, you have to put that into kilograms. And lost 9 pounds, not quite 10% of my weight in the first term, because I was forced to run round 3 miles every other day with one of these chaps called a monitor or a prefect on a bicycle saying, keep it up, Lambourne, run on, run up, run up. I was probably the fattest and the laziest, that's probably why. Punishments were meted out by the head of house. He had the authority to beat pupils. There was quite a lot of that, depending on whoever the head of house was and what his character was. But generally, over the 5 years, it was a very happy time.
Could you explain to me a little bit how the fagging system worked?
Oh, yes. Oh, right. Well, that is something which has disappeared totally today, and that's probably a good thing. When you're first there, you're a boy to do the bidding of others, of senior boys. So for your first year, you would, at the general beck and call, when one of the monitors, which is like a prefect, same as a prefect, would shout, boy, 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 all the fags, junior boys, would have to run immediately to wherever the noise was coming from. And the last one there got the job, or the task, which could be anything from mainly sending messages, because there were no phones or anything, to somebody in another house. Which could easily be half a mile or 3/4 mile away. So not onerous, because it took your time, but not unpleasant. It could be that, or being sent out to get some food, perhaps, for one of the monitors, or he had left his boots behind, someone would go and find them, go and clean them, do this, do that. Yeah, it was the scrambled when you heard the call to run. And if you didn't run and were found out for not running, then you were in big trouble. So that system was okay, it was all right. And then if you were particularly good, you became a personal fag, which meant you didn't have to run, but you looked after that monitor, made the bed, cleaned his shoes, cleaned his army kit, corps kit, and generally were at his beck and call, which is a much better thing because you didn't have to run around and answer the boy calls. So when you got to the top of the school, it was great because you had all these people running after you, and you'd never get that the rest of your life. You tried that shouting to your wife or girlfriend to come to this, it didn't happen. But there for a year, when you were a monitor, assuming you got that far, then it was probably the best year you'll ever get.
So at the weekends then, I assume, do you have Saturday school?
Saturday mornings, yeah. Sport, and every afternoon, probably watching the other teams, unless you were in one, of course. And on Sunday was, pretty boring, empty day. But again, if you played sport, you could use all the facilities, the squash courts, the 5 courts, whatever. Sunday, I was church twice a day. Yeah, it's pretty dull. We weren't allowed off the hill, as they called it, to go anywhere.
At what stage, or what age should I say, did girls start to come into the situation?
Oh, well, in my case, not for a very long time, Laurie. Not until certainly till after school. I know, sad, isn't it? I suppose the other meaningful time there was when the Queen came to visit in 1957, and I met her one to one.
Harrow School, founded in the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, is honoured by a visit from Queen Elizabeth II and her husband.
She toured the school, and I was meant to be in my study, and then the Queen comes in, introduced by the head of house, just the two of us, and I'm meant to be sitting here and say, oh, hello, Your Majesty. Anyway, you're introduced, hello, Ma'am, because we'd done ages, masses of rehearsals before HM the Queen came in. And I was struck by how small she was, even then. And you, of course, are not allowed to ask or talk to the Queen. She addresses you. And so she says, how are you enjoying Harrow here? I said, oh, very nice, thank you, Ma'am. And, what's that decoration on your wall? And it was a pair of horns, which I'd just hang up. They came from my grandfather. And he said, what are they? I said, well, they're the horns my grandfather shot this animal in Borneo. Oh, how very interesting, she said. And I had no idea whether it wasn't true at all. But so that was memorable, and I had a few other bits of small talk, and off the Queen trotted.
What were holidays like?
Oh, again, it was after the war. We didn't go abroad until, 14, 15. We went to, Frinton in Essex. We lived in Somerset in those days, where I met my cousins, which was always great. We had a hut on the beach at Frinton. Rows and rows of beach huts, a lovely greensward to play games of cricket on, a nice beach. It was cold, it was the North Sea, but didn't notice that. It was very pleasant. Yeah, I got, I think, six O-levels, which these days is nothing, but it's about par for the course, and 2 A-levels, which was also about par for the course in English and history. I took exams to get up to Cambridge. I didn't pass those, but why not? Because I wasn't that clever, but at that time, the National Service was coming to an end, and the people coming out of National Service were going to university at the same time as people leaving school were going to university. So it was 2 years into one. So that was my excuse. I went up to 2 colleges at Cambridge to study history, and anyway, didn't get in, and was quite keen to get on with life and get on to doing what I did, accountancy. What I didn't put about right at the beginning of my first day at Down School, I was put in the back row with this chap, Alistair Newman, and the teacher immediately said on our first day, age 7, I can see you two are going to be trouble. She was right on the first day, and we were trouble ever since. So, yeah, he was my great friend, and, went on to be best man at his wedding. But we had masses of fun. Once we were into driving, we went on holidays together down to South France. Most famously, when we managed to borrow his mother's Mini, took it on the ferry across, and with 2 other of his friends in this Mini. And as was the way then, we had a few drinks on board. 5 miles out of Calais, Bunny, as we should call him, because that's what we knew him as, he overdid the turn. The car hit a wall on the other side of the road, rolled over 5 times, landed back on the other side of the road, right way up, but he wasn't in it. And we were all stunned, looked around, said, God, where's Bunny? And he was coming back from the other side of the road with a hand in his head, like just saying, God, there's a hole in my head, there's a hole in my head. And he was, bleeding. Then he got in the car, said, we're going to Lambourne. Come on, let's get on, let's go. I said, no, you can't go anywhere. The car is not drivable. It's right way up, but it's got a huge dent in it, and the engine is crunched, and you're no fit to go anywhere. So he insisted on going, but he wasn't anyway. By that time, people had seen what had happened, and an ambulance was called, and he was carted off to hospital. We were sort of all right. So we spent the rest of that day in Calais somewhere, but found a newspaper which had a cutting in it with the picture of this car, saying there were 4 people in here, and there were 3 of us at the pub. And they all said, "Where's the 4th?" We said, "Oh, c'est très triste, il est mort." Oh, alors, felt very sorry. But please have a drink. So we had this story, and we had drinks everywhere. He came back out of hospital the next day. The car was airlifted back eventually. His mother was not pleased. We were all very sorry. Eventually we made it. The following year we went down to Lambourne, stayed at Lambourne for the 24-hour race, and then went down to the south of France and had a lot of fun.
Drivers race for their cars as Europe's most grueling car race begins. It's 24 hours non-stop with 2 drivers to each car. 31 cars in a struggle for mastery.
The first car I drove was an Austin A40, they were called, which was fine. I had a lot of lessons at school. Another feature of Harrow was the motor driving club. You had driving with the Hendon Police School instructors who were brilliant, and they had skid pans and things. And they taught you, go out on Sunday afternoons driving with 3 other boys and the police inspector. And the ones at the back were urging you to go faster and faster, try and get up to 80 without him spotting your thing. And then in the end, you passed your test, or if you didn't, you were really, really bad. So that was most helpful.
What did you get up to in your car?
Well, I wrote one off.
How did that happen?
How did that happen? Well, that happened coming back to my grandmother's 80th birthday in Birmingham, and I had a job in Scotland at the time. It was icy, but I was going down the straight road. Apparently, I don't know what happened exactly, because the next thing I knew, I was in an ambulance. And what had happened, apparently, a car was coming the opposite direction. I'd presumably seen something on my left coming out, put on the brakes to avoid it, and had slid sideways down into the front of this car coming the other way. There were 3 people in that other car. They were all unconscious, so no one knew what really happened. They had broken legs. We all ended up in the same hospital. I was concussed. I didn't break anything. There were no seatbelts, of course, then. So that was the end of the TR3.
At what stage did you start to spend a lot of quality time with your family?
In my 20s, I still went on family holidays until I got married, really. And they were nice, good holidays. The south of France in particular, I remember, was lovely. We didn't do skiing. My parents didn't ski. Most momentous was the one to Canada, where we went when I was just 21, and we took the plane to Vancouver and then took a train all the way across Canada to Quebec. That was a very special holiday, and we were going to come back on the Queen Mary. No, it wasn't the Queen Mary, sorry, it was another Cunard, another ship anyway. And there was a strike then, and the tour people would arrange for us to fly back from New York. And my father, again, he was insistent on something. If he wanted something, he normally got it. He said, no, this is a trip of a lifetime for my wife and my 3 children. We want to sail back. He said, well, sorry, Mr. Anyway, he insisted, and we got back on the Queen Mary from New York, 3 days across the Atlantic, 4 day, fantastic journey. So yeah, that was an outstanding holiday moment. I suppose the other outstanding holiday moments in those days was we did a cruise on the northern capitals, the Baltic states. My father always insisted he wanted the best. He went to a nightclub in the daytime with me in Stockholm to check it out, see if it was a suitable place for us to go. Nightclubs weren't, I didn't like nightclubs then. They were a bit racy, but not, enough for my sisters to go. And he said, he walked in there and said, I'd like that table. And Philip said, sorry, sir, all these tables are reserved. It was obviously at the front of the house. And he slipped him some kroner note. And I didn't know that's how life worked in those days. But anyway, come the evening, there we were, the best table in the house. It's a lovely show. I can't remember anything else about it. But this is how you get things done. If you really want things done, you pass a little cash. But I wanted to get on, and it meant going into articles to do accountancy, which was a 5-year apprenticeship, and meant I avoided or deferred national service, which I personally was very pleased to do. Father was not so pleased because he had served in the army for 6 years. We differed.
Before you started your course, what was the gap in between finishing school?
The gap. I did 2 things. I did Italy on my own for 9 weeks, in theory to learn Italian. Anyway, I went to Rome, still really more intent on having a good time rather than learning Italian. Posted to an Italian family, and I just got very ill with something, like a heavy flu. I felt dreadful. I was there for 3 weeks. I don't think I learned more than help. I feel ill. Didn't really explore Rome, missed all the culture stuff, and then went on my travels down to the south of Italy on the train, which was fantastic. And stayed at one of the first Club Mediterraneans. First time, I suppose, I got really drunk, which totally, because I was led astray by a whole lot of Irish people. I just remember waking up at midday or later in the next day saying, God, where in the hell, what have I done? What have I done? It was dreadful. But a lovely holiday. And then this friend Zia Fahani, whose father was, as I said, ambassador, said, come to Pakistan, tour Pakistan and India and whatever. So I went out there. It took us 5 days to get there. His uncle owned Pakistan International Airlines, so we had to fly by them. We took off from London and went to Geneva, which was fine. Then it went to Rome, and it wouldn't take off. We had 3 attempts at taking off, and it failed. So we had to stay in Rome for a night. We then took off successfully and went to Tehran, where again the same problem happened. It wouldn't take off, this time for 4 or 5 times. They're quite frightening in a way. And we stayed in Tehran for 3 days, and lucky Zia had friends there, so we had a nice time in Tehran. And then eventually we got to Karachi 5 days later, instead of being 22-hour trip it was meant to be. So quite hair-raising. So West Pakistan we did, which meant going through the Sindh Desert, which was between Karachi and Lahore, about 9 hours on the train. And Zia said, well, we'll fly up there. And his father said, no, Mr. Lambourne, i.e. my father, would not be happy with 2 young people flying. You'll go by the train like all the ordinary people do. So we had to go by train. It was August, 120 degrees in the heat, in through the desert, sand coming through the wind. I mean, you couldn't sleep, you couldn't move, sand and dust, and you couldn't breathe, you couldn't, thirsty. It was dreadful. Never forget that journey. Anyway, we got to Lahore, obviously, all right, and did some wonderful touring up there, driving with the Walia SWAT, who was the leader of one of the provinces in North Pakistan, in the Punjab. And he would take us around in his Jeep, and he would shoot animals as he was driving along from the Jeep for fun, and it was just wonderful. He was like the king. So we were totally spoiled and pampered. And then I went down to India, where my friends here couldn't go because, as always, India and Pakistan were semi-war, and he wasn't allowed to travel. So I did India by train by myself, Delhi, Agra, all the places you could, Bombay, Calcutta. Shocked by all the cows wandering around. The poverty was extreme. And then went to the comparative peace of Ceylon, which was now Sri Lanka. The people on the train generally were talking now, 1958, aren't we, 59, 58. Only 10 years after partition of India, Pakistan. And the Indians still had a huge respect for the British colonial system. And they were still treated as something special. I remember someone sharing their whiskey with me, which was a very precious commodity.
And then what happened when you came back from India?
Well, then I started my articles, which is a 5-year apprenticeship with Barton Mayhew, which is 5 years, and you have lots of study leave, i.e. brackets holiday, when you went to all your work. And then you take exams. So the intermediate exam I took and passed. The final exam, I wasn't quite so sure I'd pass. So my father said, I'm going to send you to North Wales to do a cramming course. I said, oh no, don't send me to North Wales, it's miles away. And I'd met Babu by then. So I said, I found an alternative place down in Andover in Hampshire, which is much the same course. Daddy said, well, it's okay, but I will not pay for that one, but I will pay for you to go to Wales. I said, okay, all right, we'll make a deal. If I pass the exam, will you pay? He said yes, and if I fail, then it's down to me. So another incentive. So I went down to there for the cram for the final, which, glad to say, passed that, so I was a qualified chartered accountant. So during my 5 years of doing those articles, you went on audits, i.e. doing the books of companies all over the UK. The one that did stand out was Woburn Abbey, which was the home of the Duke of Bedford, still is today. And we did the audit there and did it in their private rooms. And this is when the public were first admitted to Woburn Abbey. So we would emerge from the private rooms to the gaping crowds of the hordes going past, and they'd all stop and look at you and say, "Oh, do you think is that the Duke? Is that his son? Is that him?" And parking in his drive, in the vast gravel drive in front of Woburn. And that's when I had my sports car, was go round that thing and screech to a halt and upset the gravel. The Duke himself was not pleased and came and said, "I'm sorry, but I've seen your antics. This is not what we want here. Please park behind somewhere, out of view." So I did.
And then what happened after you finished the course?
We qualified. Passed the exam, and that was 1964. And there'd been talk of going to the Olympics in Tokyo that year. There was talk in the local pub. About 25 of us there, and then people dropped out, and then it became 3 people, and we decided we'd go by train. The 3 of us went to Liverpool Street. We bought a train ticket from Liverpool Street to Tokyo, and we set off sometime in July. Everyone came to Liverpool Street to wish us well, Babu included, tears everywhere, farewells. So the 3 of us set off across the UK and then to Hook of Holland, and then the train all the way through Holland, East Germany, Russia. Fantastic experience. The Russian railways in their classless society, and we were then still in the Cold War, so it was all a bit sort of threatening. There were border guards everywhere, and during the course of this long journey, we would wander through all the carriages down to the stinking hard class, which was just full of people. Animals were in there, vegetables, Russians going from west to east. Extraordinary. A woman at the end of each carriage with a tea urn, a samovar, who was essentially a spy, seeing what Westerners did. And, we had a hilarious time. I mean, we basically lived in pyjamas all the way around. We could get out at stations for a bit of exercise. And in one part of the journey, we had to go by plane because it was where their nuclear research was going on, and Westerners were not allowed to travel even by train across that part. And this plane journey was interesting in itself, because we got on this plane and there were people standing on it as well at takeoff and landing, which I'd never seen before or since. And it was probably a 2-hour flight, and then we picked up the train again. And then, landed in Tokyo for the Olympics. In those days, getting tickets was much easier. Tokyo itself was fascinating. We went on tours because my friend Miles Dorman was the Telegraph reporter for the hockey. So I also managed to get a press pass, which helped go into the press tent for drinks and the press tent for little trips. Then we did a tour of Japan in youth hostels, which was very nice. So you didn't really meet too many Japanese. Another friend of ours who didn't go, called Anthony Metcalf, asked us to sell marble, which was quite interesting, to try and make some money while we were in Japan. So we did have these small pieces of marble, about 26 samples on a cart, very heavy, which travelled all the way to Japan on the train. And we found out that Japan had plenty of its own marble. Didn't work very well, but the Japanese, being unfailingly polite, took pity on us in a way and invited us out to the nightclubs, the Ginza, which was very famous then, is now, I think, all at no cost. So we got a lot of free entertaining for trying to sell marble. Failed to sell one piece of marble. None of us had really any inkling of what we were going to do next, the 3 of us. Patty went to Hong Kong, Miles stayed in Tokyo for a while, and I then was going to go on my trip around the world. As I hinted earlier, one of the great holidays I had was when we started in Vancouver. And I always thought then that this is a place I'd like to go back to, when things got serious and wanted to work. So it's to make plans to get from Tokyo to Vancouver. which I did by going by freighter, Norwegian freighter, which is a boat across the North Pacific, which is quite a story in a way, because it was 2 people on this boat, freighter, which takes a maximum of 12 passengers. So we set sail from Yokohama, me and this other guy on board who was Japanese, and he was going to Vancouver University. So the journey was about 12 days, very rough seas, North Pacific in the winter. We would sit just for 2 days without any engines running, and the boat would just bob around, and you were just told to stay in your cabin and ride out the storm. The Japanese guy didn't speak any English. I didn't speak any Japanese, so it was a tricky relationship. So I think I could call him very rude names in English, bearing in mind we just won the war sort of thing. Things came to a head one day and we got bored with each other. I probably went to hit him. Unfortunately, he was quicker than me, and the next thing I was on the deck. I then learned he was going to Vancouver University to teach jiu-jitsu. So I didn't argue with him anymore. So I landed just before Christmas. My father had a contact there who kindly invited me to stay for Christmas. Just after Christmas, I started going around knocking on doors, seeing where I could get a job as a qualified English chartered accountant. I met a chap at a company called Laurentide Finance, which was a newly set up finance company in headquarters in Vancouver, and they had a Polish emigre who was the accountant there and who was a complete Anglophile. He loved anything English. And so when I sort of had an interview with him, English chartered accountant, this is a dream. All these American rednecks, they're useless, they're all thick. And he wasn't happy with his team he already had. So he said, fine, when can you start? And this was Friday. I said, what, Monday? I didn't know. Right. Okay, hang on there in the office. You've got the job. Here are the terms. I'll just go to the office and get you some money. Oh, and some tickets. So he said, if you can fly down to San Francisco on Monday, here's $500, which was a hell of a lot in those days. Here's a plane ticket. You'll meet up with our audit team, which are 2 people already there, and they'll get you going. And that's how that started. It was a personal finance company, really, which did loans for cars, loans for people, obviously, not mortgages, things like that. And they'd set up branches quite quickly, all the way to a very aggressive, expanding company. And they needed audits done. So that was the role, to do 3 or 4 offices, then come back to Vancouver for a week or 2 in the office, and then go off again. So from my point of view, it was fantastic. You were paid for travelling expenses, the motel expenses, stayed in a motel. So all your laundry and stuff, you all get done, brackets free, no expenses going out. It was fantastic. These offices had a motor department, and when they didn't pay their debts, the cars were repossessed. So the decent managers who you got on with would say, would you like a car for the weekend? We got 2 or 3 here you can take. So that was helpful, so I could explore wherever I was. Well, then the crunch came, you see, now. Babu was, we were corresponding. She was working in Switzerland at that time, a Shally girl. And she wrote copious letters. And I replied, not so copiously, but, no phones then, no phone calls. So lots of letters. And I suppose the crunch came, well, where was I going to be? Was I going to work here in Vancouver? Or was I going to go back to resume my life in England? So, decided come back. My family was in England. Parents were still there. Babu was in England. I mean, what more incentive do you want to come back? So I left on the Oronsay, which was a P&O boat at the time, which left from Vancouver. Big crowd of young people, which seemed to be down to ground, because I had, by that time, amassed quite a bit of money, because I hadn't spent any, and let's spend it. These people didn't have an awful lot. So every time we landed at a port, I would say, okay, let's take a car and go and have a look at this. And they said, oh, God, you drive? You know, they were that young. So we had hired this huge, great Cadillac-type car with 6 seats. And we went to Disney World. So I made some nice friendships on board. Then, home. Yeah, when Babu was there to greet me, sadly to relate, I was last on board, having sort of fallen in love on board. Well, I was didn't behave very well, frankly. So I came down last, and Babu was not happy. To this day, she's not happy. Anyway, we got over that hurdle eventually. It didn't take long before said former girlfriend was ditched. So that's one of the best decisions I made. So Babu and I lived to tell the tale.
How old are you at this stage? You must be late 20s?
Yeah, 26.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
time to get down to serious job work. I didn't want to do accountancy. I wanted to go into merchant banking, seemed to be very good. So I fixed up a number of interviews with 4 or 5 senior merchant banks at the time. And eventually got selected or chosen by SG Warburg, which was one of the leading merchant banks at the time. Very aggressive, very well run, and a very hard work ethic. And so started there. Was okay, but not exactly what I wanted to do. And I could see at that stage that there were so many brilliant people in that office, which was the office was big room of say 20 people. And I could see I wasn't going to be one of those brilliant people. And at that time, Andrew Balcom, we had similar thoughts in that we wanted to do our own thing and get out of this hothouse. And that's when the next stage began, really. Of course, in the meantime, we'd got married, which of course was a hugely important part of the year. Things were going nicely. Babu had ditched all her former boyfriends. I ditched all my former girlfriends. We were beautifully, blissfully happy. And I was thinking, God, I've got to make this proposal because she might easily slip away. She was that quality, and I could see that. So, ideal. I said, it's her 21st birthday. And we went to a place called Haddie's, which was a nightclub in West London. And, I popped the question there on her 21st birthday. And funnily enough, she said, well, yes, why not? And her 21st birthday was, I think, the next day. They had a party in Isha for that. And we were married 6 months later. Quite quick, really. Yeah, and then the wedding was at Stoke Dagenham Church, where we had things done. And the reception was at Upper Court. As was customary then, was literally a wedding at 2:30, 3 o'clock. Back to Upper Court with obviously champagne, drinks and sandwiches and a few speeches, and it's all over in 3 hours. Bridesmaids, Patrine and Sue didn't want to be bridesmaids. So we had 2 small bridesmaids, Josephine's, Austin's children, who are still around today somewhere. And Sandy was best man, and we had 5 ushers. And then off we sped. We were trying to think in what car, but I think I had a Sunbeam Alpine by then, which was a sports car. And we sped off, and I'm afraid I'd probably had too much to drink. Babu was not happy. We'd only gone about 2 or 3 miles, and she'd always had enough. But we went to the Complete Angler, Marlow, for our honeymoon night. So we did get there without crashing the car, but not a sensible thing. No drink driving laws. I have to say that because, if there were drink driving laws, you would have considered it. So spent a very nice night there, and off we went, again, very fortunately, to Barbados for the honeymoon of a lifetime, which I vowed I would come back every 5 years. Sadly, things didn't work out that way, and it was 25 years before we went back.
And then, so then you come back from the honeymoon. Was Babu working then?
Yeah, she had a very good job at, I think it was at Bowwaters then, and she had her own flat in London. with 4 other girls. So yeah, then she had another job with a fashion house. So yeah, she gave up all that to run the house, set up the house, and raise the family.